Hi, my name is Talia, and I will be giving a Dvar Torah on Parshat Vayechi. Before I begin, to give credit where credit is due, a lot of my inspiration for this Dvar Torah comes from the teachings of the Rebbe. So, with that, let's begin. This Parsha is immediately interesting because the title, Vayechi, literally means "and he lived." So you would expect this Parsha to be about life, maybe the beginning of life, or even the meaning of life, something along the idea of life. However, when you actually read the Parsha, you realize this is not really about life. This is about Yaakov's death, his burial, his message to his sons, everything surrounding his final days. So that immediately begs the question of, well, what is this title talking about? Like, why is it saying, "and he lived"? What lived? Nothing, Yaakov just died. So I think a way to answer the question of, well, what's living, what is this title referring to, is by looking at what Yaakov left in this world, what a part of him lived on. And so the first immediate answer is, well, his sons. His sons are what carried his legacy. His sons are what continued his message, and just that's his continuity. So I think that's definitely the first step in finding an answer to this. And I think a way to take this further and make it a little bit more interesting and layered is that, well, it's not just his sons that lived on, but it's the message he imparted on his sons, namely the message of faith in God, connection to God, relationship with God, and such. And a way to think about that is that this Parsha talks about something living beyond death, essentially. The Parsha's title is saying something lived past Yaakov's death. The only thing that lives past death, or is eternal in a sense, is God, right? God's the only one who exists beyond life, whose life and existence is not determined by physical being. So I think that a very interesting way to look at what lived past Yaakov is not only his sons and the message, and rather it's the message that he lives on his sons and the message of God, this eternal being that exists. So when it says Vayechi, it is talking about Yaakov and his sons continuing his legacy, but it's also about the fact that the message that he left with his sons is eternal. The message he left with his sons will live past his life, past his son's life, all the way down to our lives. So I think that it's really nice to think about how by teaching God's ways and the Torah and learning about God and talking about God is really a way of passing on eternal knowledge that will always be true, will always be in existence, one that will last for generations. And as we've seen for thousands of years of precedence, that is the case. We're talking about the message of God that Yaakov passed down, not necessarily the tent that Yaakov lived in. So I think that that's really a beautiful thing to think about, how the message of God is always eternal, and that's the legacy of the Jewish people, and every Jewish person can take part in this eternal knowledge. So with that, good Shabbos, and I hope you enjoyed.